Hi, good morning. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm George and welcome to Copacabana beach, probably the most iconic beach in Rio de Janeiro, probably the most iconic beach in Brazil actually. This is actually the first day that I've got proper sun here in Rio de Janeiro. The other days it's been quite overcast and it's often rained, which has been a little bit annoying for a plein air painter. So I'm really excited to paint on the sunny Copacabana beach. Please subscribe to my channel and let's start painting.
Before I began this painting, I prepared my board with an underlayer of raw umber paint, and I'm now sketching the composition of the mountains in the distance. As I painted the underlayer of the painting darker than usual, the moment that I put down the paint for the sky, it instantly gives the sky a bright glow due to the contrast between the surrounding values. One thing to bear in mind is that the tonal value and colour of the underlayer, or imprimatura as it's known, will likely impact the overall appearance of the final painting. For example, if the imprimatura is light, the overall painting will tend to be lighter, as even mid-range values will appear dark on a light imprimatura, and so it will impact the value decisions that you make at the beginning of the painting. Likewise, if this layer is warm in colour temperature, there will be a tendency to paint the colours warmer in the painting, as any cool colours will look extra cold when compared to the warm undertone. So this effect of relative perceived value or perceived colour in relation to what's next to it is known as simultaneous contrast. And if you look online, you'll be able to find some really good examples of this optical illusion that simultaneous contrast creates. So you'll find, for example, a grey square inside a black square which is next to a white square which inside has a grey square. Basically the one which is next to the white will look a lot darker and the one which is next to the black will look a lot lighter. However, they are the same value, so this is something which it's useful to be aware of when you paint. As I paint, I'm working my way from top to bottom, using the painted areas as a colour and value reference for the areas that I paint next to them. I'm also trying at this stage to cover each area broadly with its general hue and tonal value, whilst refraining from adding too many small details at this stage. So here I'm painting the waves, and I'm trying to paint them at a point where you can see some of that underbelly, that sort of greener section of the wave, which is rising up out of the sea, and then in some areas the waves are crashing down, and I'm trying to paint this as well, that really white frothy section as the wave crashes over on itself. And having this bright light section of the wave in the lower half of the painting helps balance out the composition against those light white areas in the clouds and that general lightness of the sky. One thing to try and avoid when painting waves is to paint them as horizontal stripes across the sea. So when I paint them, I'm really trying to look for variety in the shapes of the waves. So once the waves are broken and meet the sand, you tend to get this section of white frothiness as the water sort of back washes into the sea. And I'm just painting this in as well. And then in front of this area, you tend to have a wet section of sand which has often a bluey, slightly purpley colour to it as it's reflecting the sky. And I always find this area quite fun to paint, as you can pick up a lot of reflections in it and create that nice shiny appearance of this section of wet sand. And often you have people walking in this area, which is another nice touch, as you can add the reflection of their bodies in this section of sand. Here I'm painting in the sand in the foreground, and I'm painting this section first as a mid-tone value of the sand, as there are sections of the sand which are a lot lighter, a lot closer to white, and other sections which are quite a lot darker, especially the areas where you can see all the footprints. The sand also gets a bit darker as it gets closer to the sea. So once I've got this general section down, I can then start adding the lights on top of this with thicker paint, and also paint in some of the shadows which have been caused by footprints in the sand. So one thing that I'm doing now is something that I set out to do from the start, which I had in my mind's eye when I started the painting, was to paint a lot of the people, a lot of the life in the scene, people going up and down the beach, people swimming in the sea, and to really try and capture the atmosphere of Copacabana, this iconic beach in the south zone of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. So to paint the people, I'm using quite a small pointy filbert brush, and I first mix a general skin colour and tone for the people, and also a darker tone that I can use in areas such as the hair. And I'm just applying the brush strokes quite definitively, and I'm not rendering the figures a great deal as I'm just trying to paint the general shapes and colours. I also paint on the colour of whatever clothes that the people are wearing, and I'm keeping the figures quite simple, but just with the shape, the proportion and the colour, I can create quite a realistic impression of a person walking down the beach without having to try and render very small details such as hands or faces, as on this scale the people are quite small, so it would be very fiddly to actually add a lot of detail to these figures. So one tip when painting people in a busy scene like this, where people are constantly moving and walking right past you, so you only have a few seconds really to try and capture their gesture, is that you don't actually have to paint a particular person. You can look around, start painting one person, and then chances are someone else will be in a similar position. You can look at them as a reference. You have quite a lot of liberty to make stuff up and paint people in spots of the painting that you think work best for the composition. You don't have to paint people exactly how they are or exactly where you saw them. You can kind of take bits and pieces from different people you see. Using these as references, you can create realistic looking figures in your plein air landscape. As the people get closer to the foreground, I do add more detail and try and pick out some shadows on the form. For example, here in the foreground I've decided to paint one of the men who walks up and down the beaches selling footballs and hats, as this is quite iconic of Rio de Janeiro, of Copacabana. You get a lot of people selling different things, and they spend all day walking up and down the beach from Copacabana to Ipanema and then back again, carrying a really tremendous amount of stuff. And so this man walked past, he had a big hat, he was holding footballs, he was holding hats on his other arm, and I thought that this would make for quite an interesting focal point in the foreground of the painting. So to paint this man, I start by painting the shadow sections, areas in shadow, and then go in with more detail in the t-shirt, in his hat. And I'm painting quite thickly in order to paint directly on top of the wet paint which is underneath.
so I hope you enjoyed that video of me painting here on Copacabana beach in Brazil. I had a lot of fun painting different people into the painting. I painted in some of the people who walk up and down the beach selling things. This guy's selling some hats and some footballs, so I thought that was very iconic of Copacabana. I also painted in a few couples, some people swimming in the sea. I really enjoyed painting here, so if you enjoyed that, please give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.